It is well that war is so terrible, lest we grow too fond of it. General Robert E. Lee. Leading up to the end of 1862, the Civil War had been brutal on both sides. The Union was taking it particularly hard, having suffered more battles lost. Neither the soldiers or the people of the North were very happy with the way the war was going. Low on money, food, and supplies, they simply wanted the war to be over, no matter the consequences. But with spring of 1863 came the Battle of Chancellorsville. It was a surprise attack by the Union that should have been easily won, but turned sour when they waited too long to attack. This disaster of a battle frustrated the North even further, and gave the Confederates yet another confidence boost. The rebels needed one more battle to gain a definitive advantage, and Gettysburg was destined to be it. Tilly Pierce lived in the town of Gettysburg during the summer of 1863, and was sitting in class when the rebels marched into town. We were having our literary exercises on Friday afternoon at our seminary when the cry reached our ears. We beheld a dark, dense mass moving toward town. Our teacher, Mrs. Esther, at once said, "Children, run home as quickly as you can." It did not require repeating. The battle arced across the outskirts of the town in the first 2 days, killing thousands, including Amos Humstead. My name is Amos. I died on July 2nd, 1863, clutching a picture of my children. The innkeeper's daughter found me and helped me through death. She took the picture, set it up in the tavern. It stayed there, and I with it, as a topic of conversation until one day a guest asked to advertise it, to find my family. I only hoped he could. On July 3rd, General Lee sent 3 divisions through open fields towards the center of the Union line. It was practically suicide, but orders were not to be questioned. It turned out to be one of the bloodiest charges in American history, claiming thousands of lives in a few hours. General Pickett was in charge of the division with the most losses, dubbing it Pickett's Charge. Fearful for their daughter's safety, Tilly Pierce's parents sent her to a friend's farm away from town. Being in actuality closer to the battle, the home took in many injured soldiers. Not all of them made it through the night. I treated many men in those few days, but one still haunts my memory. I forget his name, but he asked that I come to see him one morning. I suppose he enjoyed the company. I suppose I would as well. All I know is that I kept my promise, but he was not there to greet me. The higher the climb, the harder the fall, and the Confederate army had a very long way to fall. They had just lost many of their friends, the chance of more territory, and the faith of their people. In stark contrast was the Union, who had just pulled themselves out of a vertical dive with this powerful victory. The North could not have won such a monumental battle, in such a grand way, at a better time. The people were excited about the prospect of potential victory, and were much more willing to fund a winning team. With more money, the Union was much more likely to win battles, fueling momentum to move the Northerners through the war. With these devastating losses, the South was never again able to mount a successful invasion of the North, which was the original purpose of Gettysburg. Amos Humstead's story took many weeks to spread to where it originated, with his family. While reading a religious newspaper, his wife found that she was now a widow with 3 young children to care for. Despite the sorrow that fills their story, Amos and his family were very lucky to have the closure they did. Most would never know the fate of those loved ones sent to war. This 3-day battle turned the tide of the Civil War, not only for their starved rows of shoeless troops, but their wives and daughters waiting in the towns and villages that the Civil War so heavily trod upon. It turned average citizens like Tilly Pierce into historians whose stories would be recalled for centuries to come. In In the fall, after the epic sprint of Gettysburg, President Lincoln was to give a speech regarding the many valiant soldiers who had laid down their lives in those few days. In the grand era of long-winded eloquence, Honest Abe's short address came out to mixed reviews. Some appreciated the concentrated speech, but most, including Lincoln himself, felt it was a flop. And yet, over time, the public began to discover and understand the true brilliance of Lincoln's words. Everyone had known that the deaths at Gettysburg were for the cause, but Lincoln explained why they had to continue fighting. If not for the cause, then for the brave men who had died before them. Without this push, the deaths at Gettysburg would have been meaningless. But with it, they represented the sacrifices made throughout the Civil War, and especially at Gettysburg, that would change our world for years to come.
"Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure.